My name is Denise Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. I spent the last 25 years serving my country in the military, starting when I was just 17. After 2.5 decades of dedication, sacrifice, and putting my life on the line for America, I finally came home to Cedar Valley, expecting the warm embrace of family. Instead, I found myself standing on the sidewalk outside my childhood home like a stranger. The house looked different. New paint, new fence, new mailbox. Even the old oak tree where I used to swing as a little girl had been cut down. I walked up to the front door, my heart racing with excitement. I hadn't been home in 5 years, not since my last leave. Military life had kept me busy, and my family always said they understood. I knocked on the door and my mother opened it. For a moment, her face went completely white, like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom, it's me. I'm home," I said, opening my arms for a hug. But instead of joy, her expression turned cold. "What are you doing here?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I live here. This is my home." "No," she said firmly. "This isn't your home anymore. You need to leave." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, what's wrong?" "It's me, Denise. Your daughter." My father appeared behind her, his face just as unwelcoming. "You heard your mother. Get off our property." "Our property?" I repeated, confused. "Dad, this is Grandpa Joe's house. He left it to me in his will, remember? You're just living here because I let you stay when I joined the military." My parents exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. "I don't know what fantasy you're living in," my father said, "but this house belongs to us. Always has. And we don't want you here." I pulled out my phone to call my brother Danny, thinking maybe he could explain what was happening. But when I dialed his number, it said the line was disconnected. "Where's Danny?" I asked. "Who?" my mother said, raising an eyebrow. "Danny. My brother. Your son." "We don't have a son named Danny," my father said. "And we certainly don't have a daughter named Denise. Now, leave before we call the police." My hands started shaking. This couldn't be real. They were acting like I didn't exist, like I'd never existed. I thought maybe they were having some kind of breakdown, or maybe this was their way of dealing with stress. "Mom, Dad, please. I know I've been away a long time, but I'm still your daughter. Remember when I was 8 and broke your favorite vase? You made me work extra chores for 2 months to pay for it. Remember when I graduated high school and you both cried? Remember when I left for boot camp and you gave me Grandpa's dog tags?" Nothing. Not even a flicker of recognition in their eyes. "I'm calling the police," my mother said, reaching for her phone. "Wait," I said. "Just give me 5 minutes to prove who I am. I have my military ID, my birth certificate, photos." But they had already dialed. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. I tried explaining the situation, but my parents told them I was a disturbed person who was harassing them and claiming to be their dead daughter. "Dead daughter. Ma'am," one of the officers said to me, "you need to come with us." As they led me away, I saw my parents watching from the window. The strangest thing was that my mother was holding a framed photo. Even from a distance, I could see it was a picture of our family, but something was wrong with it. It looked like someone had been cut out of it. At the police station, they ran my ID and confirmed I was who I said I was. The officers seemed confused by the whole situation, but told me it was a civil matter. They couldn't force my parents to let me into the house, and they couldn't make them acknowledge me as their daughter. I spent that first night in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand what had happened to my family. The next morning, I decided to visit the county courthouse to look at the property records. Maybe there had been some kind of mistake. What I found there made my blood boil. According to the records, my grandfather's house had been transferred to my parents just 3 months after I left for the military 25 years ago. The transfer document showed my signature, agreeing to give up all rights to the property. But I had never signed any such document. I studied the signature carefully. It looked like mine, but something was off about it. I remembered signing thousands of military documents over the years, and I knew my own handwriting. This signature was close, but not quite right. Someone had forged my signature and stolen my inheritance. I requested copies of all the documents and spent the rest of the day going through them. That's when I discovered something even more shocking. My parents hadn't just taken the house. They had used the property as collateral for multiple business loans under a company called Riverside Holdings, LLC. Riverside Holdings was listed as a construction company that had received several government contracts over the years. Federal contracts worth millions of dollars. And according to the paperwork, the company was owned by someone named D. Mitchell. D. Mitchell. That was supposed to be me. My parents had been using my identity to run a business and get government contracts, all while I was serving overseas. They had stolen not just my inheritance, but my entire identity. And now that I was back, I was a threat to their scheme. That's why they were pretending I didn't exist. But what they didn't know was that during my 25 years in the military, I had learned a few things about investigation and evidence gathering. And I was about to put those skills to very good use. The next morning, I received a call that changed everything. A lawyer named Patricia Wells was on the line. "Miss Mitchell," she said, "I represent your parents in a civil matter. They're seeking a restraining order against you for harassment and trespassing." What? I couldn't believe it. "Furthermore," she continued, "they're prepared to file charges for identity theft if you continue to claim to be their daughter. You see, Miss Mitchell, their daughter Denise died in a military training accident 15 years ago. They have a death certificate to prove it." The phone slipped from my hand as the room started spinning around me. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. "That's impossible," I told the lawyer. "I'm very much alive, as you can hear." "Miss Mitchell," Patricia Wells said in a cold voice, "I don't know what game you're playing, but impersonating a dead person is a serious crime. The Mitchell family has been through enough grief without someone like you trying to take advantage of them." "I am Denise Mitchell," I shouted into the phone. "Check my military records. Check my fingerprints. Check my DNA. The court hearing for the restraining order is scheduled for next Friday at 2 p.m., she said, ignoring my protests. "I suggest you find yourself a good lawyer, because if you show up claiming to be their dead daughter, I'll make sure you're arrested for fraud." She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. I immediately called the military records office and asked them to send me a complete copy of my service record. Then I drove to the local hospital where I was born and requested a copy of my birth certificate. I needed to gather every piece of evidence I could find to prove I was who I said I was. While I waited for the documents, I decided to do some detective work of my own. I drove to the Cedar Valley Cemetery and looked for my own grave. It took me 2 hours of searching, but I finally found it. There it was. Denise Mitchell, beloved daughter, 2000 to 2010. According to the gravestone, I had died at age 18. But I was 32 years old and very much alive. I took pictures of the grave with my phone and noticed something strange. The grass around the headstone looked newer than the rest of the cemetery, like it had been planted recently. I knelt down and touched the dirt. It was soft, not packed down like soil that had been there for 15 years should be. Someone had put this grave here recently, probably within the last few months. I spent the next few days visiting every place from my childhood. The elementary school, the pizza place where I had my 12th birthday party, the park where I learned to ride a bike. Everywhere I went, I asked people if they remembered me. Most people looked at me like I was crazy. But then I met Mrs. Rodriguez, my old third-grade teacher. She was now retired and working part-time at the local library. "Denise Mitchell," she said, squinting at me through her glasses. "My goodness, you do look just like her. But that poor child died years ago. Such a tragedy." "Mrs. Rodriguez, it's really me," I said. "Remember how you used to let me help you grade papers after school? Remember when I brought in that injured bird and you let the whole class take care of it?" For just a moment, I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes, like she was remembering something. But then she shook her head. I'm sorry, dear. I think you're mistaken. Denise was a sweet girl, but she's been gone for a long time. It was like someone had gone through the entire town and convinced everyone that I was dead. But how was that even possible? I decided to visit my old job at Murphy's hardware store, where I had worked during high school. The owner, Mr. Murphy, was still there, now in his 70s. Excuse me, I said, walking up to the counter. Do you remember Denise Mitchell? She used to work here about 15 years ago. Mr. Murphy looked up from his newspaper and studied my face. Denise Mitchell. Denise Mitchell. He repeated slowly. You know, you remind me of someone, but I can't quite place it. I'm Denise Mitchell, I said. I used to stock shelves here after school and on weekends. Oh, no, that's impossible, he said, waving his hand. Denise died in some kind of military accident. Her parents were devastated. They even had a memorial service right here in town. A memorial service? Yes, lovely service. The whole town came out. Her parents spoke about what a brave young woman she was, how proud they were that she died serving her country. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. My parents had held a fake funeral for me. They had stood in front of the entire town and pretended to grieve for their dead daughter while I was alive and serving overseas. The thought made me sick to my stomach. But then Mr. Murphy said something that gave me hope. You know, though, it was the strangest thing, he continued, scratching his head. About a year after the funeral, I got a call from someone claiming to be Denise. Said she was on leave and wanted to visit the store. I told them they were sick for playing such a cruel joke on an old man. What did the person say? They knew things only Denise would know, like the time she accidentally knocked over the paint display and we spent 3 hours cleaning it up, or how she used to bring me coffee every morning because she said I looked tired, things nobody else could have known. My heart started racing. What happened then? I hung up on them, he said sadly. I thought it was just some cruel person trying to hurt an old man. But now that I think about it... He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes growing wide. It's impossible, he whispered. But you have her eyes. Exactly her eyes. Before I could say anything else, the bell above the door chimed and 2 police officers walked in. The same 2 who had arrested me at my parents' house. Ma'am, one of them said, we need you to come with us. What for? You're under arrest for identity theft and fraud. As they put handcuffs on me, I saw Mr. Murphy watching with his mouth hanging open. I called out to him as they dragged me away. Mr. Murphy, remember the coffee. Remember the paint display. It was me. At the police station, they put me in a holding cell while they processed the paperwork. I learned that my parents had filed official complaints claiming I was impersonating their dead daughter and trying to steal their property. But what shocked me most was when Detective Harrison, a stern woman in her 40s, came to interview me. Listen, miss, whoever you are, she said, sitting across from me in the interrogation room. This is a small town. We all knew Denise Mitchell. We all went to her funeral. Her parents are respected members of this community, and Riverside Holdings has brought a lot of jobs to Cedar Valley. Riverside Holdings? I asked. The construction company. They've built half the new buildings in this town, including our new police station. They're good people. Have you ever looked into where their money comes from? Detective Harrison frowned. What do you mean? I mean, have you ever wondered how a small-town construction company could afford to build so much? Have you checked their government contracts? That's none of your business, she said, but I could see doubt creeping into her eyes. What if I told you they've been using a dead person's identity to get those contracts? What if I told you they've been committing federal fraud for 15 years? I'd say you're grasping at straws to get out of trouble. But just then, another officer knocked on the door and handed Detective Harrison a folder. She opened it, and her face went pale. What is it? I asked. She closed the folder quickly. Your military records came in. According to this, Denise Mitchell has been on active duty for the past 25 years. Her service record shows she was deployed to Afghanistan last year. That's because I am Denise Mitchell. Detective Harrison stared at me for a long moment. This doesn't make sense. If you're really Denise Mitchell, then who did we bury 15 years ago? The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. Detective Harrison kept looking back and forth between me and the military records, her confusion growing by the minute. I don't know who you buried, I said honestly, but I can tell you it wasn't me. She picked up her phone and made a call. Judge Morton? It's Detective Harrison. We have a situation with the Mitchell case. Yes, sir. I think you need to see this. Within an hour, I was sitting in Judge Morton's chambers with Detective Harrison, my court-appointed lawyer, and Patricia Wells, my parents' attorney. Judge Morton was a kind-looking man in his 60s who had been on the bench for over 20 years. Let me understand this correctly, Judge Morton said, reading through my military file. Miss Mitchell here has been serving our country for the past 25 years, with deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Germany. Her service record is spotless, and she has received multiple commendations for bravery. Your Honor, Patricia Wells interrupted, my clients are grieving parents who buried their daughter 15 years ago. This woman is clearly disturbed and trying to take advantage of them. Then explain this, Judge Morton said, holding up my military records. According to the Department of Defense, Denise Mitchell reported for duty last month after completing a tour in Afghanistan. How does a dead person serve in the military? Patricia Wells went quiet, but I could see her mind racing. Judge Morton turned to me. Miss Mitchell, I'm going to ask you some questions that only the real Denise Mitchell would know. What was your grandfather's full name? Joseph William Mitchell, but everyone called him Grandpa Joe. He used to make the best pancakes in the world and told stories about fighting in World War II. What happened to your childhood dog? Buddy got hit by a car when I was 14. I cried for 3 days straight, and Grandpa Joe helped me bury him under the big oak tree in our backyard. Judge Morton nodded. Those details match what I remember from your grandfather's will reading. He specifically mentioned both the pancakes and the dog in his final letter to you. There was a letter? I asked, surprised. Yes. He left instructions that it should be given to you when you turned 30. But according to your parents, you were already dead by then. My heart sank. Another piece of my grandfather's love that had been stolen from me. Judge Morton continued his questions for another hour, asking about everything from my first-grade teacher's name to the scar on my knee from falling off my bike. I answered every single question correctly. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. Miss Mitchell, I'm convinced you are who you say you are. The question now is, what happened 15 years ago, and why did your parents claim you were dead? Your Honor, my lawyer said, I'd like to request permission to exhume the body that was buried under my client's name. Patricia Wells jumped up. Objection. That's completely unnecessary and would cause my clients tremendous emotional distress. I think it's very necessary, Judge Morton said. If Miss Mitchell is alive, then someone else is in that grave. We need to know who. He signed the exhumation order right there in his chambers. 2 days later, I stood in the Cedar Valley Cemetery watching as workers carefully dug up the grave marked with my name. Detective Harrison was there, along with the county coroner and several other officials. What they found made everyone gasp. The coffin was filled with sand and rocks. No body at all. This is impossible, Detective Harrison said. We all attended the funeral. The coffin was carried by 6 pallbearers. It had weight to it. Sand and rocks would weigh about the same as a human body, the coroner explained. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look real. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that no innocent person had died in my place, but anger that my parents had gone to such lengths to fake my death. That evening, I got a call from Mr. Murphy at the hardware store. "Denise," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I remembered something important. After your supposed funeral, your parents came into the store asking about security cameras." "Security cameras?" "They wanted to know if I had cameras that could see their backyard. They seemed very nervous about it. At the time, I thought it was just grief making them paranoid, but now—" "Did you have cameras?" "No, but I told them about the traffic camera at the intersection near their house. The one the city installed for monitoring traffic flow. It's been there for 20 years, and it records everything." My heart started pounding. Traffic cameras keep recordings for years, especially in small towns where storage space isn't an issue. The next morning, I went to City Hall and requested access to the traffic camera footage from 15 years ago. The clerk, a young woman named Beverly, was hesitant at first. "That's a lot of old footage," she said. "What exactly are you looking for?" "I need to see what was happening at 425 Maple Street between October 1st and October 15th, 2010. Beverly looked at the address and frowned. "That's the Mitchell house. Why do you want to see footage of their place?" "Because I'm Denise Mitchell, and I need to prove my parents faked my death." Beverly stared at me for a moment, then shook her head. "Everyone knows Denise. Mitchell died years ago. You can't just come in here pretending to be a dead person." I was getting tired of this reaction, but I pulled out my military ID and my birth certificate. "Look at the dates," I said. "Look at the photos. I am Denise Mitchell." Beverly studied the documents carefully, then looked at my face, then back at the documents. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I know it seems impossible, but it's true. And if you help me get that footage, we might be able to solve a 15-year-old mystery." It took some convincing, but Beverly finally agreed to help me. We spent 3 hours going through old digital files until we found the footage from October 2010. What we saw on that grainy video changed everything. On October 8th, 2010, we watched my parents and my brother Danny loading a large wooden box into a truck. The box was exactly the size of a coffin. They drove away in the middle of the night and came back 3 hours later without the box. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was what happened the next day. We watched as several men in expensive suits came to the house. They carried briefcases and stayed for over 2 hours. When they left, my father was holding a thick envelope. "Who are those men?" Beverly asked. I enhanced the image as much as possible and managed to read the license plate on one of their cars. It was registered to Blackstone Federal Contracting, a company I'd never heard of. I spent the rest of the day researching Blackstone Federal Contracting online. What I found made my blood run cold. Blackstone was a government contractor that specialized in military base construction. They had received billions of dollars in federal contracts over the past 15 years. And according to their website, one of their key partners was Riverside Holdings, LLC, my parents' company. But the most shocking discovery came when I dug deeper into Blackstone's ownership structure. The company was owned by a shell corporation, which was owned by another shell corporation, which was ultimately owned by someone named D. Mitchell. Me. They were using my identity, not just for Riverside Holdings, but for a massive federal contracting scheme worth billions of dollars. And the day after they faked my funeral, they had met with Blackstone representatives who gave them what looked like a very large payment. I was still processing this information when my phone rang. It was Detective Harrison. "Miss Mitchell," she said, her voice urgent. "You need to get down to the station right now. We just received a call from the FBI." My hands were shaking as I drove to the police station. FBI involvement meant this was bigger than I had imagined. When I arrived, Detective Harrison met me at the front desk with a worried expression. "They're waiting for you in conference room B," she said. "Denise, I've been a cop for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this." She led me down a hallway to a small conference room where 2 people in dark suits were waiting. A tall man with graying hair introduced himself as Agent Marcus Thompson, and a woman with sharp eyes said she was Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "Miss Mitchell," Agent Thompson said, "we've been investigating a massive federal contracting fraud for the past 3 years. Your name has come up repeatedly, but we assumed you were complicit in the scheme." "What scheme?" I asked, though I was starting to piece it together. Agent Walsh opened a thick folder and spread documents across the table. Riverside Holdings and Blackstone Federal Contracting have received over $2.8 billion in government contracts since 2010. All of these contracts were awarded to D. Mitchell using your social security number and military credentials. I stared at the numbers in shock. $2.8 billion. My parents hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had built a criminal empire using my identity. The contracts were for military base construction, veteran housing projects, and emergency disaster relief, Agent Thompson continued. But here's the problem. Most of the work was never completed. The money just disappeared into offshore accounts. Disappeared. Your parents and their associates have been stealing from the federal government for 15 years, Agent Walsh said. They've taken money meant to house homeless veterans, rebuild after hurricanes, and construct critical military facilities. I felt sick to my stomach. While I was overseas serving my country, my own family was stealing money meant to help my fellow soldiers. But what we couldn't understand, Agent Thompson said, was why someone with your spotless military record would be involved in such a scheme. Your commanding officers all said you were one of the most honest and dedicated soldiers they'd ever worked with. Because I wasn't involved, I said. I didn't even know about any of this until 3 days ago. The agents exchanged glances. Miss Mitchell, if what you're saying is true, then you're the victim of one of the largest identity theft cases in federal history. Agent Walsh leaned forward. We need your help to bring them down. But first, we need to verify that you really are Denise Mitchell and not an accomplice trying to distance yourself from the crimes. They spent the next 2 hours questioning me about my military service, my childhood, and every detail of my life. They even called my former commanding officer in Afghanistan, who confirmed that I had been on active duty during the entire time the fraud was taking place. Finally, Agent Thompson nodded. We believe you, Miss Mitchell, which means we need to move fast. If your parents realize we're onto them, they might try to disappear with the money. What do you need me to do? We need you to wear a wire and confront them, Agent Walsh said. Get them to admit what they've done. With your testimony and the recordings, we'll have enough evidence to arrest them and recover the stolen funds. The idea of facing my parents again terrified me, but I thought about all the veterans who had been hurt by their crimes. I thought about the families who lost their homes in disasters and never got the help they were promised. I'll do it, I said. The next morning, FBI agents fitted me with a tiny recording device hidden in my jacket button. They positioned surveillance teams around my parents' house and gave me an earpiece so they could guide me through the conversation. I walked up to the front door of my childhood home, my heart pounding. This time, when my mother opened the door, she didn't look surprised to see me. I was wondering when you'd show up again, she said coldly. Hello, Mom. We need to talk. She let me inside, and I saw my father sitting in his favorite chair, reading the newspaper. He looked up when I entered. I thought the police made it clear you weren't welcome here, he said. Dad, I know what you've been doing, I said, sitting down across from him. I know about Riverside Holdings. I know about Blackstone. I know about all of it. My parents' faces went pale, but they tried to act confused. I don't know what you're talking about, my mother said. Really? Then you won't mind explaining how a small-town construction company has received $2.8 billion in federal contracts over the past 15 years. My father's newspaper crumpled in his hands. You always were too smart for your own good. Dad, why? Why did you fake my death? Why did you steal my identity? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the father I remembered from childhood. His shoulders sagged, and he looked older than his 65 years. "It started small," he said quietly. "After you left for the military, we were struggling to pay the bills. Your grandfather's house had a mortgage we couldn't afford. So you forged my signature on the property transfer. We thought you'd never come back," my mother said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "You were always talking about making the military your career. We thought you'd forgotten about us. So you decided to forget about me instead." My father continued. "A few years later, Danny got in trouble with some bad people. He owed them a lot of money, and they threatened to hurt all of us if he didn't pay." "Where is Danny now?" "He's safe," my mother said quickly. "We sent him away where those people can't find him. But that still doesn't explain the billions of dollars." My father sighed deeply. "We met someone who said they could help us get government contracts using your military status. At first, it was just small jobs, but then it grew bigger and bigger." "Who did you meet with?" "People from Blackstone," my mother said. "They said as long as we had a veteran's credentials, they could guarantee us contracts. They said it was helping veterans like you. But it wasn't helping anyone. You stole money meant for disaster victims and homeless veterans." "We donated to veteran charities," my father protested. "We gave millions to good causes." "After you stole billions," I shot back. "Dad, people died because the relief housing you were supposed to build never got built. Veterans are sleeping on the streets because the housing projects you were paid for don't exist." The room fell silent. Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Walsh whisper, "Ask them about the offshore accounts." "Where's the money now?" I asked. My parents looked at each other nervously. "What money?" my mother said weakly. "The $2.8 billion you stole from the federal government." "We don't have that much money," my father said. "Most of it went to Blackstone and their other partners. But some of it you kept." Another long silence. "We have about $50 million in various accounts," my mother finally admitted. "We were saving it for retirement." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. My parents had become criminals who stole from disaster victims and veterans, all while faking my death and erasing me from their lives. "There's something else," my father said quietly. "The people from Blackstone, they're not just business partners. They're dangerous. If they find out we've been caught, they'll kill us." Through my earpiece, Agent Thompson's voice was urgent. "Ask for names. We need names." "Who are they, Dad? Who are the people from Blackstone?" Before my father could answer, there was a loud crash from the kitchen. The back door had been kicked in, and 3 men in black clothing rushed into the house carrying guns. "Nobody move!" one of them shouted. In my earpiece, I heard Agent Walsh yelling, "All units move in. Now, now, now." But the men were already in the house, and they were pointing their weapons directly at me. "Get down on the ground," the lead gunman shouted. "All of you." My parents and I dropped to the floor as the 3 armed men spread out through the living room. Through my earpiece, I could hear chaos as the FBI agents coordinated their response. "We have armed suspects inside," Agent Walsh's voice crackled. "Repeat, armed suspects inside the house." The lead gunman, a tall man with cold eyes, looked down at me. "You must be the famous dead daughter," he said with a cruel smile. "You've caused us a lot of trouble." "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're the people who've been paying your parents for 15 years, he said. "And now, thanks to your little investigation, our entire operation is at risk." One of the other men was searching the house while the 3rd kept watch at the window. "FBI is surrounding the building," he called out. "We need to move fast." The lead gunman grabbed my father by the shirt and pulled him to his feet. "Where are the account numbers, Mitchell?" "I don't know what you mean," my father stammered. "Don't play dumb with me. We know you've been skimming money from the contracts. We want our share." "We gave you everything," my mother cried from the floor. We only kept what you said we could keep. That was before your dead daughter came back to life and brought the FBI with her, the gunman snarled. Now we need to disappear, and we need money to do it. I realized that my parents weren't the masterminds of this operation. They were just small-time criminals who had been used by much bigger fish. But that didn't excuse what they had done. Suddenly, there was a loud voice from outside. "This is the FBI. The house is surrounded. Release your weapons and come out with your hands up." The gunman at the window cursed. "They've got snipers on the rooftops. We're trapped." The lead gunman's face twisted with rage. He pointed his weapon at me. "This is all your fault. If you had just stayed dead, none of this would have happened." "Wait," I said, thinking fast. "I can help you get out of here." "How?" "I know this house better than anyone. There's a basement tunnel that leads to the neighbor's garage. My grandfather built it during the Cold War as a fallout shelter. The FBI doesn't know about it." The gunman's eyes narrowed. "You're lying. Ask my parents. They'll tell you." My father nodded reluctantly. "She's right. There's a hidden entrance behind the water heater in the basement." Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Thompson's voice. "Denise, what are you doing?" I hoped the FBI agents would understand my plan. The tunnel was real, but it didn't lead to the neighbor's garage. It led to an old storm drain that came up right in the middle of the FBI's perimeter. If I could get the gunmen to go down there, they'd walk right into a trap. "Show us," the lead gunman demanded. We all moved toward the basement, with the gunmen keeping their weapons trained on us. As we walked down the creaky wooden stairs, I whispered into my hidden microphone, "The tunnel comes up at Storm Drain 47 on Elm Street. Have agents waiting there." In the basement, my father moved aside some old boxes to reveal a small door hidden behind the water heater. The gunman pushed him aside and peered into the dark tunnel. "How do we know this isn't a trap?" he asked. "Because I want to get out of here alive just as much as you do," I lied. One by one, the 3 gunmen crawled into the tunnel. I waited until they were all inside, then quickly grabbed a heavy wrench from my grandfather's old workbench and jammed it into the door mechanism, trapping them inside. "What did you do?" my mother gasped. "I sent them straight to the FBI," I said, speaking loudly so my microphone would pick it up. "The tunnel leads directly to a storm drain where Agent Thompson's team is waiting." Sure enough, within minutes we heard shouting and gunfire from the direction of Elm Street, followed by Agent Walsh's voice in my earpiece. "Suspects in custody. All 3 are down and secured." FBI agents poured into the house through both the front and back doors. Agent Thompson found us in the basement and looked at me with admiration. "That was brilliant thinking, Miss Mitchell. You led them right into our trap." "I learned a few things about strategy during my military service," I said. As the agents handcuffed my parents, my mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Denise, I'm sorry. We never meant for it to go this far. You faked my death, Mom. You erased me from your lives and stole my identity to commit federal crimes. How much further could it have gone?" My father hung his head in shame. We were scared and desperate. When Danny got in trouble, we thought we had no choice. "There's always a choice, Dad. You chose money over your own daughter." Agent Walsh approached with a thick folder of documents. "Miss Mitchell, we've been monitoring the Blackstone accounts since early this morning. Thanks to your parents' cooperation, we've been able to freeze over $800 million in stolen funds." "What about the rest of the money?" "Some of it was spent on legitimate expenses over the years, but a lot of it went to other criminal organizations. We'll be investigating this network for months." "And my parents?" Agent Thompson looked at my mother and father, who were now sitting on the basement steps in handcuffs. "They're looking at serious federal charges: identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. They could spend the rest of their lives in prison. But," Agent Walsh added, "their cooperation today will be noted. If they continue to help us track down the other members of this network, the prosecutor might consider a reduced sentence. As we walked back upstairs, Judge Morton was waiting in the living room with a stack of legal documents. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "I have some paperwork for you to sign. First, we're officially reversing your death certificate and restoring your legal identity. Second, your grandfather's property is being returned to you, along with interest for the 15 years it was illegally held." He handed me the deed to the house where I was standing. After 25 years, I was finally home. "There's also this," Judge Morton said, giving me a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather's letter that was supposed to be given to you on your 30th birthday." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and read, "My dearest Denise, if you're reading this, it means you've made it to 30 years old, and I couldn't be prouder. I know military life is hard, but I also know you're strong enough to handle anything. This house has been in our family for 3 generations, and now it's yours. But more than that, I want you to know that no matter how far you travel or how long you're away, you'll always have a home to come back to. Love, Grandpa Joe." I wiped away tears as I folded the letter carefully. Over the next few weeks, the story of the Mitchell family fraud made national news. The FBI's investigation revealed that Blackstone Federal Contracting was connected to criminal organizations in 12 states, all using similar schemes to steal government money. My parents were sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, but because they testified against the Blackstone leadership, they avoided life sentences. They wrote me letters from prison apologizing for what they had done, but I wasn't ready to forgive them yet. My brother Danny, who had been hiding in Mexico for the past 5 years, returned to the United States and testified against the people who had threatened our family. He received immunity in exchange for his cooperation. As for me, I used the recovered funds to start a foundation that provides housing for homeless veterans and disaster relief for families in need, the exact things my parents' crimes had prevented from happening. I kept my grandfather's house and turned part of it into a resource center for veterans struggling with housing and legal issues. On the wall of my office, I hung the deed to the property and my grandfather's letter, reminders that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the people who love you and support you no matter what. The woman who had been erased from existence for 15 years was finally home. And this time, no one could take that away from me. 6 months later, as I sat on the front porch of my house watching the sun set over Cedar Valley, I got a call from Agent Walsh. "Miss Mitchell," she said, "I have good news. We've recovered another $400 million in stolen funds from overseas accounts. The total recovery is now over $1.2 billion. "That's wonderful," I said. "How many families will that help?" "Thousands. The disaster relief funds alone will rebuild entire communities that were left behind after hurricanes and floods." After I hung up, I looked at the new oak tree I had planted in the front yard, right where my childhood swing used to be. It was still small, but it would grow strong and tall just like I had. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even with the people who hurt you. Sometimes the best revenge is proving that their cruelty couldn't break you, and using your survival to help others who are facing their own battles. I had come home after 25 years of service to find that my family had erased me from existence. But in the end, I didn't just get my life back. I got the chance to build something better than what they had tried to destroy. And that was worth more than all the money they had stolen.